This is a bit of an architectural workflow. It's not strictly an architecture, but it's the flow a user would typically go through in an externalized fashion for applications. Now, traditionally, as Jamie mentioned, applications would have, accesses baked in, and every application would have its own. And of course, that's difficult to manage because it's every application on its own and not kind of combined into one general thought of accesses, which is what externalized authorization provides. So your typical workflow in a situation where you want to focus on your applications having no concept necessarily of authorizations baked in, but externalizing it and asking a question of, is this person supposed to see this stuff? This is what we're looking at. User's going to log into your application through APIs or microservice, whatever it is. The user is going to log in. The login method is going to follow the standard login process that you have within your organization. Your authentication is going to be the same. Of course, that part follows true. Once the user's in the application, now is when you get into, what am I going to present the user? What do I want their experience to be? Do I want to give them a custom landing page that allows them to see some of the things they're supposed to see? Do I want to give them a table that has information on it that they're supposed to see? Decisions need to be made at this point. The application, of course, knows that it needs to externalize those decisions. So it's going to work with what's called a policy enforcement point. That's going to be kind of a little wedge between the application and the Axiomatics REST API, which is where the decisions come from. The PEP is responsible for gathering information from the application, such as who is the user, are they trying to take a particular action, are we trying to present them a specific tile or widget or UI, are they trying to work with certain types of information. Anything that we can understand at that time, it's going to send to the Axiomatics decision service via a query. Now the query is going to come into the what we call Axiomatics decision service. That is ultimately a PDP, a policy decision point. That PDP has a set of policies and attribute connectors and all kinds of fun stuff in there to allow us to make decisions. Now we take that input from the policy enforcement point as a starting point to running policy. We go through the entire workflow of policy to determine, are we going to get a permit? Are we going to get a deny? Are we going to send advice or obligations, which is additional payload back to the policy enforcement point? When we start going through that policy, though, we're going to notice that we're missing information. And that's information that we typically will gather from an attribute connector connecting to an attribute source or an organization's source of truth. Right. So if I need more information about a user, maybe I'm going to reach out to Active Directory. Maybe I'm going to reach out to an IGA or something like that to gather more information about the user. Maybe I also need to gather more information about the resource they're trying to access. Maybe it's data in a database and I need to understand where that information resides. All of this is information that gets gathered during that decision-making process. Ultimately, at the end of this, a decision is made, whether it's a permit or deny, and with additional information in the forms of obligation or advice, which is a payload that'll give you information, maybe why someone was denied, or more information or context about someone being permitted, or an obligation, which is, yes, you're allowed to do this, but maybe I want to enforce step-up authentication, and the PEP should trigger MFA before the user gets access to a certain thing. All of these things get returned from our PDP, the Axiomatics decision service, back to the policy enforcement point. And the policy enforcement point, of course, works with the application to enforce the decision that was made. So I'll pause there, Jamie, but that's kind of the typical workflow that we would see. That's why I kind of said it's not strictly architectural. Architecture is obviously required in that, but that is the typical workflow that we would see for kind of a standard application that's following an externalized authorization model.